Hi, and welcome to the Josilyn Drake Show. I am your host, Josilyn Drake. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm excited about our show on today. You know, relationships are our number one asset, but rarely do we know how to keep those healthy. Hey, my guest, Maggie Banger with Restore Counseling Services is here to help us learn how to navigate and make sure we're having healthy relationships. Help me welcome to the Josilyn Drake Show, Maggie Banger.
Hey, Josilyn.
Hey, Maggie, thank you so much. Maggie has been on the show. This is her third time. She has such great knowledge and wisdom to help us walk through some processes that we don't normally know how to. For a lot of us, counseling is taboo, but Maggie has been here. She's given us a wealth of knowledge. And so I was excited to have her on today to talk about relationships, especially in light of the fact that we're all at home with family members that we're not used to being with 24/7. And so the things that we've been able to avoid, we're now having to face because they're in our face 24/7. And I thought that it would be great to have Maggie on today to kind of help us navigate the things that sometimes bring conflict and unhealthy relationships amongst our family members. And so today what we want to talk about is perception, how we perceive our world, how we see our world. Maggie, can you kind of tell us a little bit about what perception actually is?
Well, we all have our own unique viewpoint for the entire world. And I personally believe that we come into the world fresh, like a blank slate, wide-eyed and wondering as an infant. But as we begin growing and forming, the way that we see everything begins taking shape. And that occurs a lot within the family of origin that we're born into. And what I mean by that also is the authority figures that are around us as well. So our perception of how things are actually fused most of the time as a child with the authority figures around us. So it starts in the very beginning. There's so much brain development that happens before the age of 5, and perception has already developed by that time. And so then it just gets honed and changed after that time period. One of the tools that I use to learn about my own perception and the perception of others is called the Enneagram, Enneagram. And it is a personality typing tool, but I also use it as a spiritual tool for growth and maturation within my own personality structure and in my ability to understand others. And so one of the analogies that's used with that, because there are 9 different personality types, is that football stadium that has 9 different entrances. So if I got a ticket for section 1, lower deck, seat A6, that would be my ticket. And I would be sitting in the lower deck in that seat. There would also be people who got section 1, upper deck, AA7, and they would have that seat. We would be in the same section, so our angle would be the same looking at the field, but it would be a slightly different perception because it's a slightly different angle. And that's the way it makes sense to me best to understand that even if we come from the same viewpoint, even our perception can be slightly different. And so that helps me realize nobody is going to see the world exactly as I see it. We may have a lot of similarities, but it's not going to be exactly the same. And that also allows me to have compassion and empathy for my family, my fellows, because they see a little bit differently than I do as well. We're all in the same stadium.
Mm-hmm.
We're all looking at the same thing. We're all rooting for the same team, so to speak. And throughout life, as you grow and change and mature, You may move sections
Mm-hmm.
as you see different things, and you learn to experience different levels of your own personality and different connections and connectivity with others. This all starts, though, within the family of origin, of where you're raised, who you're raised with, who's not present, who is present, and how you communicate with them. And so that communication typically is shaped, a lot of it significantly, by the age of 4 or 5,
Wow.
and begins to solidify with our worldview perception by the age of around 10, 12.
Mm. Wow, Meg, you didn't just took me off my rock. There's so many questions that I just angles that I want to come. Yeesh. So okay, let's talk about the family origin. What we were taught in the home, how we perceive life through our parents. Um,
Uh-huh.
do you think that today, like if we're 40, 50, 60 years old, actually that 5-year-old is really living most of our lives, or we're seeing life through that 5-year-old still, if we don't know or have these tools to recognize that we need to grow in the way we see life?
Truthfully, yes. I think that we need to have an awareness of how ingrained the
Mm,
struggles are within our family of origin for us, within our own souls and minds. Um, if, for say, if I'm primarily raised by a grandparent because my mother wasn't present, either through she was involved in my life or she was at work all the time, things like that, then I may have more of an allegiance towards older people
mhm.
and people of my own age range. I may not trust parental authority, but I may trust elder authority. There's a lot of different dynamics that can come into that. I may have a lot more ease talking with people other than my mother because she wasn't present as much during my formative years while I was awake. So looking at those kinds of things, at who was present in your life and how were they present, who was not, why were they not, and then when they were present, what were those interactions like? Were they caring? Were they neglectful? How your family speaks. For instance, one side of my family all talks at the same time, constantly, and everybody knows what everybody's saying. Other side of the family, nobody talks
Mm.
at all, hardly, unless you're asked a very direct question, then they answer it and they stop talking. So two very different dynamics for me within my own family of origin, extended family.
Wow. So this is, guys, this is going to help us so much because now we're getting a picture and understanding of why sometimes, it's said of men, it's said of a lot of us, why don't you just grow up, and honestly, you're in these adult bodies not recognizing that the child, that 5-year-old, is still wreaking havoc and having its way, and it's pity parties or it's tantrums. And I think this is going to help a lot of us to see why we relate to others and see our world through those eyes. What do you think about, like, when we encounter some type of trauma or rejection at a certain age, and it never gets processed, and we just keep moving through life, and so anytime anything kind of similar to that thing just comes up in our spirit, what do you say to that?
Well, to me, and the previous shows we've talked about together, grief, and grief is a big thing for me. We have to look at and be aware of the losses that have happened within our lives and address them truthfully and holistically in order to not add on
to every single thing as we move forward in life to make it more and more complicated, because we are piling on previous baggage from all kinds of relationships that is unprocessed or unresolved. And so learning to place accountability within each relationship for the contents of it, my part and the other person's part, is very important. It's not about attacking people. It's not about being mean. It's not about vengeance or even justice in that regard. It is about a complete holistic viewpoint of understanding so that we can know how we tick and what makes us us. And then if we're okay with those things, keep them going if they're working. And then if they're not working, figure out what to change. So for many of the reason that our families send us over the edge is because they helped install our buttons that when they get pressed, we go off. And they didn't necessarily intend to install them. It just happened. It just happens as a part of life. So, for instance, if I'm expected to behave in a certain way, I'll use grades. I'm expected to have all A's or all A's and B's. And that's just the expectation. It's never discussed. And so I'm scared to death to talk about the fact that I can't understand what's going on in math right now, and I'm struggling and I'm making a D, and I'm scared to talk about it at home because I'm supposed to have A's and A's and B's minimally. And so I am afraid to talk to the people who are supposed to care about me and love me the most, right? About something that I'm not good at, that I can be perfect at. And I'm afraid to ask for help because it'll ruin that image and their expectation. So being a parent, being somebody in my middle age now, I think that it is ridiculous that my kid wouldn't want to talk to me about where they're struggling. I also understand that they believe they want to show me their best self, and they would be scared to tell me if they're having any problems because they don't want to disappoint me. They think if they've disappointed me some way that I will not love them, or I will love them less, or I will punish them. It really goes down to fear and love, whether I'm fear-based or whether I'm love-based. And we learn that at a very young age. Do I react from fear or do I react from love? And so I was talking about my assumption is, oh gosh, I can't tell them that I'm struggling with math because then they'll get mad. They won't love me anymore. I'll get punished. They'll think I'm stupid. You could fill in the blank of negative cognitions that would develop. The reason they're developed, though, is because I believe that my brain is correct. So we have to always go back to the reality for our own selves is our brains are created to be problem-solving machines like a computer. And they always think they are right. Always. And we have to be to challenge that. That's why knowing everybody else has a different perception than me, even if that same section of the stadium, is so helpful, because the beliefs that I have about myself and about other people sometimes they're actually doing me a lot more than good. The truth is, if I sat down, at least I know with my parents, if I sat down, and I pray my children feel this way about me, and said, I just cannot get this concept within these equations for algebra, and I'm going to end up failing. I need a tutor or something. I need some help because I don't want to make a bad grade, but I just cannot understand it. I'm pretty sure that they would say, I didn't know you were struggling like that. I'm so glad you came and told me. Let's see what we can do to help you. We don't want you to fail either, but we want you to do the best that you can do, and that's the best you can do. So let's help you do your best. Not think you're a failure.
Yeah. Geez, kind of wonder, like, how are we going to get this all situated? There are just so many different angles that you could come from a child. And even when you carry that over into your adult relationships, if you're in a relationship with your significant other and you mess up, if you still have that mindset, you don't know how to communicate, hey, I'm just not good at that. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to communicate. I don't know how to be there for you. I don't know how to lead. I don't, and we don't say those things, and we become defensive and try to hide it because we feel like if we do, maybe you won't love me or you'll think less of me. And so I guess the key thing in that is building safe places for people to be able to be and to still love them and help where you can. What do you think about that?
I completely agree with that. So I think modeling being willing and teachable, modeling that, modeling the vulnerability of just being honest in front of our spouse, in front of our significant other, in front of our kids, in front of our grandparents, in front of our grandkids, whatever that may be. We're all around each other right now. People are being parents, grandparents, teachers, full-time workers. People are laid off. There are all different circumstances going on right now. Some people are sick. Some people are not. And we're all in a certain way together in this, but still there's different nuances, like in that stadium, from those viewpoints for everybody. We have to learn to listen more than we talk.
That reminds me of the scripture that says, be quick to listen and slow to speak. That when you said that kind of reminded me. I'm just going to throw scripture up every now and then when it just makes sense.
And I think it's really important too that we give people the chance to be themselves and to feel okay with that, which means we can laugh, we can cry, we can get angry, we can do all those things and realize they are feelings and emotions that are normal and natural to human beings across the planet, and they pass if we allow them to be expressed appropriately.
But what happens when you're allowing people to be themselves, but you need something else from them? How do you work that relationship out? In my book, it talks about the work, the book Whole, where you do the work and you heal your own soul so that you can stop needing people so drastically, desperately. So what do you say to that when you're not whole, when you got all these issues, and so you're needing certain things from these individuals that you're in a relationship, but being themselves, they don't have the capacity to give you what you need? Then what happens in that case?
Well, you are going to need to have courage to know what your actual needs are. So that internal work that you're speaking of needs to be done. We all have needs. And simplistic communication is using I statements. I need, I want, I believe, I see, all those kinds of things. Within that, you will notice that sentences are not started with you need to, you want, you have to, when we begin conversations where there are already emotional charges within the relationship, and we begin those statements and conversations with a list of you need to do this and you need to do this and you need to do this and this and this and this, we've already shut down the person that we're talking to, because they don't want to be. I don't know any of us, honestly, who really loves being told what to do by somebody else.
That is true. That young or old.
Mm-mm. Doesn't matter what age. And some of us, the older we get, the worse it gets. For some of us, the older we get, the better it gets. It just depends on the personality structure.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you, I do not like being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I do like what your needs are. I do like to know how you see things. And I do like to know how I can partner with you and come alongside you. So if you start a conversation with me about, I'm really struggling with da da da, it would be helpful for me if you would.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would have the choice and invitation to partner with you and ask you more questions. So the vulnerability and the courage of putting your needs and wants into those I statements, while it sounds so simplistic, it is so profound. It is a game changer in relationships to own your own thoughts and feelings.
That is awesome. You know, most times women go on and they say this, that, and the other, but they can rarely tell you what it is that they need. Like when you finally get down to it and they say, okay, what it is that you need? And you're like, because you're just so used to not getting it, or you're just used to, you know, fussing about not getting it, that when somebody finally says, what is it that you want? You done forgot, or you never took the time to figure out what that was. You just know that whatever it was, you weren't getting it. So now you got to go do the work and ask yourself these questions. You know, what is it that I really want? You know, and not expect people to read your mind or your heart on what you need. And so I love that when you talked about simplistic communication and how we see our worlds really affect whether or not we can communicate with one another. You know, am I being heard? Are you really hearing me? Or are you just not listening and waiting on me to finish so you can tell me A, B, C, and D? You know, so can you help us with this communication skill? I love what you said about that simplistic communication.
It is important, and I teach in my grief work that we need to be a heart with ears with doing grief work. But I think that we need to approach all of our relationships in life that way. We need to hear out of love. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to listen twice as much as we speak. For women, that would be more difficult. We're typically a 20,000 word a day type of person, where a male is that. And that's just typically true in an average state across the board. And so for us, we're going to want to talk. And in that, we can talk all the way, what I call, we're going to talk around it and never actually talk about it.
Right.
And that's exactly what you mean in what you were sharing. What happens, I think, in many cases is some of us get to the point in our lives that we are right now where we have had so much other worth and other esteem that we don't have enough self-worth and self-esteem. And what I mean by that is we have been so focused on making everyone else comfortable and happy around us so that we don't rock the boat, cause any issues, make any waves, that we don't know what we like, what we want, what we need. That's exactly what you were referencing. So if we get straight to that pointed question, sometimes we really do not know the answer. So this time period we have right now, to me, is a wonderful time for a sacred journey if we can take it deep within souls and spirits to answer those questions. Are they the deep philosophical questions of the world? No, they are not. They are, what kind of eggs do I like? Because I don't have to like the same that you do. And it really is that simplistic. That reference comes from the movie Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere a long time ago. And at the end of the movie, she sits down and tries a bunch of different ways to eat eggs to find out how she really likes them, because she always did whatever the male in her life did.
You know,
never was.
Yeah, there's a culture though that we're actually taught that from childhood to do that. In fact, it's almost shunned upon for you to even consider self, honestly. Even in the church, it's like, why, you know, we're told to crucify our flesh. he didn't say crucify ourselves. He said crucify your flesh. Two different things. We're talking about our soul here. He came to save the soul. It's very important to him. So there's work that we need to do, and that comes from, as in my book, the better me, the better everyone else. The more I come to know who I am, my identity, the better I am in this world for everyone. And so talk to us a little bit more about the importance, not being selfish. That's not what we're saying. Just life is about me. What we're saying is to honor you as the individual and recognize the value that you've been given just as a human being, just across the board. And especially women, sometimes, you know, when we get married or have children, we just throw us out of the, we're just done. You know, life becomes about everyone else but us, and there should be a balance, and so that you don't begin living a life of bitterness, not knowing who you are when the kids are gone, you know, just bringing balance and order into our lives. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I get a little bit excited when I talk about some of this stuff because it makes me happy. So here we go. I believe that each of us has a God-breathed divine essence that is put into us at conception and birth. And I'm the only one who has mine. You're the only one who has yours. And when we align and choose submission to the Spirit within the Holy Spirit, we create this spiritual amount. It's a chemical compound, so to speak, of my soul, earthly self-soul, that I was sent here to be, and the Spirit of God fused together to do the good works that I individually have been called to do in this lifetime, in this realm, of this place. Mm-hmm. And so the more layers I put on top of me as I go throughout life to protect myself, or what I make assumptions about, or these negative cognitions and beliefs, the more difficult it is for that true essence to shine forth or break through that. Mm-hmm. Okay? So the work has to be done to rid ourselves. I always talk about it's like layers of clothes, to take off these jackets and coats and sweaters and all these different things we've put over our true self, so that divinely breathed person can come out and shine. What happens with us is that the cultural viewpoint become stronger messages and take on the voice of God rather than allowing the voice of God to be the voice of God. Mm-hmm. So we have to begin to look at what has God told me? What has God spoken and breathed into me? Because I'm not going to be the same kind of mother that my mother was, even though I think my mother is a phenomenal mother. I love her. I talk to her. I revere her. I honor her. I think she mothered me well to the best of her ability. And I think she still does. And I don't think mothering or fathering ends even in their physical death, because those attributes and legacy live. Anything done in love, I think, is eternal, mm-hmm. and expands. But our mothering process continues throughout. Our influence continues throughout. And so if I think about the expansion of love, if I truly learn to love and honor myself, there's actually more of me to give away than if I allow my selfhood to be constricted, and then I'm closed up like this fist and nothing can get out. It becomes smaller, and then it just gets crushed away. But when I open up, all of that comes forth and starts to come out and expand. And so self-care and self-love really is about you figuring out who you are and how to have a divinely intimate relationship with God that creates this powerhouse you were created to be. And you may have been created to be the best mother in the world. That may be what you were divinely made to be. but you and God have to make that decision, not everybody else around you telling you that's what you need to do.
Yeah, I think parenting, we want to make our children who we want them to be. And I, I think we should more so kind of see who they were created to be, as opposed to trying to give them and make them into who we want them to be. And that's a hard lesson, because sometimes you don't realize that you're doing it. And it takes your child one time to tell you, I'm not you. Then you get offended, but they're telling the truth. They're absolutely not you. Their soul has experienced different things than your soul has experienced. What you need, they don't need, or, the needs are different. And so when you're trying to parent them from a place of what you needed and not recognizing sometimes that what you needed, they already have. So, you got to parent from who they are and who they were created to be. And a lot of clues actually of who our children were created to be comes when they're kids. If you would pay attention to the things they love, when nothing else has been infiltrated into them or put inside of them, and their pureness, they kind of reveal what God put into them when they first came here, because it's these things that just light them up, and that's what they love to do. I can remember my son, when he finally could sit up, all he would do was play the drums. And the drums would be pencils on some canned goods. And he was a crying child. All he wanted was his mama. Nobody wanted to keep him because all he wanted was his mama. But when he got a little older, where he could sit up, and you just gave him pencils, and he would sit there literally for hours and play those drums. And he was, oh gosh, I don't want to tell on him, but he was 25, still with his pencils playing a drum. He plays at a church, and he has his own, that was in him. So I noticed that was a gifting. That was something that I needed to expose him to, so that it could be developed even more. And so in knowing that, there were things that I would have preferred him to do and preferred him to be, and, and so on and so forth. But I had to honor the creator that made him and what he put inside of him to make sure that came to be. And I think that's the assignment of a parent, is to recognize what the creator put on the inside of those that he trusted us to steward. They're not ours, we're just stewards. And begin to pray, what is it that they're supposed to do? And so I can get them into these right circles and expose them to the right things. But again,
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that completely. And that takes us realizing in real moments and real time, when we are thwarting that and taking a step back and saying, well, am I inserting me into this and my expectations? Or if you're in a disagreement with them, ask them, what did you hear me say? Because sometimes, let's say he's always wanted to be a drummer, and you tell him, that's great. You're going to do these other things because they're important. And so the way he may hear that is, you're never going to let me drum. That's not what you said. You need to take care of putting up your laundry and doing the dishes and things like that. You didn't say you're never going to be a good drummer and that I don't want you to be one.
Right.
So clarifying, a lot of times when there is tension in the room or anger or misunderstanding, in real time, being able to look at that and say, I don't know if you heard what I really was saying or my intention. So can you tell me what you did hear so that we can clear this up? Mm-hmm. Because people with perception and those thoughts that our brain says are correct are going to hear and take things and filter them through their thought processes and beliefs. And we need to check, and we need to do a communication check of hearing one another. Mm-hmm. So, and especially when we're dealing with teenagers and down, a lot of times they will filter things more negatively than more positively. We have a tendency within us to go toward that, and it keeps our system in fight or flight so that we get actually energized by that, and it creates loops that go over in our head so that we can problem solve and strategize and do all these things that keep us locked up in something that honestly may not even matter or be true.
Be true. Exactly. That is so true. I was just thinking of a number of things with dealing with my kids when you were saying that. One of them is I remember I would tell my son, we have to learn how to honor the voices of our kids. They're kids, yeah, but that doesn't mean that we just tell them go sit somewhere and shut up, or that we need to listen to their voices. But I would tell my son, I don't mind you coming back and saying, Mama, that's not how it was, or you didn't see that right, or you didn't hear that right, or I didn't do that. But not in the moment when I'm chastising you. Wait till things cool down, then come back and let's have a conversation. And I don't mind if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't mind apologizing to you about that. And I can also remember my daughter and my son each saying that I loved one better than I did the other because I treated them differently. And you're so right, kids' perception, the way they see things, or it's from an immature place. And so, but it's good when you create a culture for your kids to feel safe enough to have conversations with you, but if you shut them down, they're thinking all kinds of stuff, and you're trying to figure out, like, where did this individual come from? Why are they doing that? Why in the world is she thinking that? Why is she thinking suicidal? Why is she cutting herself? Why does she think she's ugly? And it's because we haven't created a culture for them to feel safe enough that we even care about their feelings. Because a lot of times we tell our kids, go sit down somewhere. I don't want to hear what you got to say. You talk too much.
I'm too busy. Your feelings are too big. You too much. Just go handle that somewhere else. And we communicate, you're not important enough for me to stop what I'm doing. Work's more important than me. Phone and your computer are more important than me. They take these things very literally. So we need to begin affirming our children out loud. I think you're beautiful. I think you're funny. I enjoy being with you. Even if you weren't my kid, I would love being and hanging out with you. You cool. Saying all these different kinds of things. And one of the things that I think is critical, especially when we are all cooped up together, is to be able to have the ability to take a time out. Just like you were saying, let's not do that right now. Let's all take a time out and then come back together. And so you can literally, like they do in football game, you're going to take a break. We're going to have a timeout. You can have a signal. You can say, hey, I got to take 5. Let's come back and discuss this later. You need to be able to insert time out, because when people are elevated, you're going to start talking without thinking. You'll be reactive instead of proactive. That's not helpful. The other thing is, we even say this a lot of times in our own family at home, let's hit the reset button. We're all in some kind of funk. So let's just hit the reset. We're going to start over. We're doing a do-over today.
That's good. That's when you begin to love the people that are in your life. You love yourself, though. That's where it flows out of. And you begin to love yourself, then you can love others. The Bible tells us that to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so if I'm not necessarily loving me like that, I can't love you the way you need to be loved, because I'm still trying to figure out that I'm even worth being loved. And I'm easily trying to get that love from everybody else instead of me giving it to me. I was commanded to love myself. I wasn't commanded to be telling everybody, you need to love me, you need to love me, you should love me, you should not. No, first I need to love me. And that's the work I think that we all have to do. But I think what you're teaching us now is putting a ground, leveling the playing field so that our kids don't have to go through some of the things and won't have to work out so much stuff like we have to work out, because our parents didn't have this knowledge.
They didn't. And a lot of times it was, let's be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, we don't talk about that kind of stuff, this feely stuff, feelings, and you think differently than me, do things differently than me. That's not allowed in this place, so we're not even going to talk about it. And so these mentalities of everything being the sameness, it creates a lot of things that brings, for some people, security, but for a lot of people, it brings what I consider to be bondage. It doesn't allow people to be who they naturally are created to be. It keeps some strata in the same place that it is instead of breaking them through. It keeps ceilings where they are and floors where they are, where they don't need to be, where we need to be kicking them down and going through them. And we need to be more and bigger and better. And if we don't allow the fertile ground to be present, more, bigger, and better doesn't occur. See, I want my kids to be better than I am.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. You know, so if you're that person that sometimes we've been raised to think that if people don't agree with us or everybody's not like me, then there's an issue. I don't want you in my life, or I just want to be with the people who are in agreement with me and who to us, I guess they like me and they're on my side. You know, we got this side type thing. If you ain't on my side, then, you know, you just go on about your business. Yeah. So how do we readjust and really see that from the right perspective?
How can I ever know what I truly believe and truly think if I can't bounce it off of people around me who may think differently? I'll never have to verbalize why I think and feel and believe what I do, or own it within my own self, unless I dialogue about it and be able to explain it and verbalize it. We are created as communicative and unity type creatures with each other. Humans in general, us as a people, we are a communal tribe. Mm-hmm. And we need to be able to sit with and listen without judgment. It is extremely hard. We need to do what we want done with us. We want for people to hear us. Mm-hmm. And in order to be heard, we must hear.
Mm-hmm. That was good. That was good. So,
and it's truth. We have to model and behave through what we want to receive. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We teach people how to treat us.
Yeah. Yeah. What if you know how we were talking about earlier, you learned those things from home, or maybe in your relationship, you've had some things that didn't go right. And so you're still holding on to those things. You don't even realize it until a conversation goes off, and then you say, yeah, but you did this, you know, and it was 20 years ago, whatever, or it was 10 years ago, but you don't realize that you're still holding that on to that, you know, and so you bring it up. And sometimes you feel bad about it, but more than anything, I think it's key to realize that you're holding it. So how do you let it go?
All right. I think that's extremely important. And when I talk about that in relationships, I laugh and I call it going historical. So we go historical.
Yes.
And all have the capacity to do it, and we all do it. When things like that are triggered within us, to me, I think that it is a message that we have a spiritual clog that we need to rid ourselves of. So we need to look at what's my part in this. What's the other person's part in this? I need to apologize for mine. I need to forgive them for theirs. And I need to release the situation to God, because it is blocking my own channel of communication with God. It's like having a clogged artery in your heart. We got to get a stent in there. We got to get that stuff cleared out.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was...
Yeah. And so it's about, and you don't necessarily have to do this with that person.
Right.
Out loud. This work is done for you to clear your inside. especially if it was a decade ago or 20 years ago. They're probably walking on living their own life and doing their own thing, and you are drinking your own poison from resentment and regret, keeping your spiritual life clogged up with negativity because you will not turn it loose. We have to loose.
Yeah, in the book Whole that I wrote, I think we move forward when we ask the right questions. Sometimes the questions we keep asking and telling ourselves just keeps us in circles or going forward, back and forth. But when we ask the right questions, it catapults us forward. And so what are some questions that we can ask ourselves? Because it's work. It's absolutely hard work that has to be done. We can't shrink back from it. You can't push it under the rug. You can't ignore it. If you want to go and be a better version of yourself and see what your future holds. Now, if you want to stay stuck and going around in that circle when there's so much more for you, then everybody has a choice. But for those of us who realize what you're saying and we see ourselves in what you're saying, what are some questions? My book basically is just a book of questions that only you can answer. What are some questions that we can ask ourselves to not do that, to move forward, to unblock the arteries?
Well, I think we need to start with what's triggering me. So something is stirring up in here. What am I feeling? What are the thoughts that come up when I feel that? Are they originated from this situation, or do they remind me of something else, and what is that? And then begin to just do what I call spiraling it, and you deduce it down, down, and down, and down, and down, and down until you get to what your root fears are, what your root belief statements are, and then you can decide. You can make a decision. Do I want to continue to allow this to run my life or not in this way? Am I satisfied with how this is working and operating? Is this an operational belief that's giving me outcomes in my life that I like? And most of the time, if we're doing this work, the answer is no. And so then we need to rework what we do want that belief to be, and then we need to begin to combat it with affirmative statements. We need to flip it around. We need to begin to seek the restoration that God can give us within ourselves internally, and we need to surround ourselves with people who speak life into those instead of death.
Yes.
And so some of those questions are, what is my part? For many of us, we get stuck in a victim mentality. We have to be willing to own some part of it. Now, I'm not saying I caused somebody to beat me up. I'm not saying I caused somebody to rape me. I'm not saying I caused somebody to molest me. I'm not saying I made my spouse leave me, or my child abandon me. What is my part, though? My part may be I continue to believe that I am worthless and trash because of what happened in this. And so I perpetuate being treated trash because I've held on to that belief. That's my part. I can change that, because what happens is I continue to give those negative events power in my life. And so I have to be willing to recognize, and that's what the hard part is. What's my payoff for this? What's my part, and what's the payoff I'm getting? And sometimes the payoff is I stay stuck. And I don't know how to be anything. And so this is where I'm comfortable, like you were saying. Because fear holds us back from trying to be anything different or thinking that we can be. So asking those pointed questions of, if I didn't have this, life would look like.
That's pretty awesome. Something you hit on, the root. You know, I've been mentoring some ladies from the book and some other things. And the point of the matter, I always tell them, is to get to the root, because you can get small victories and you just peel back a layer. Well, there's so many more layers. What you want to do is get to the root. Where did that enter in? And sometimes you'll find it goes all the way back to your home. And it doesn't matter if you travel, you may be living in another state, another country, but that went with you. That didn't change not one thing. You can get married, you can buy a Maybach, you can do whatever you want to, but that root is going to go wherever you go. And so I guess what you said, asking the right questions, help us to be able to peel back all of that until we get to the root. Because I believe you don't get the victory until you can get to that root. And sometimes we don't get there because it's hard and it's hurtful and it's painful to revisit that place. And that's why we perpetuate it. That's why we're afraid to touch it. You know, that's why the wounds are still, the scabs and, you know, all that. Some of it's open sores and things like that. It's under the rug. And we, you know, so life sometimes I think each time that we get those triggers, it's an opportunity for us to say, hey, what is this about? And why do I keep doing that? Why is that affecting me this way? And so I think one very important thing that you're doing for us today is to help us to recognize that thing. So now we have some tools to understand that, okay, I keep saying this, or I keep doing that, or I keep thinking that way, because the self-talk is beyond any other talk in the world. That self-talk can build you or it can tear you down. It's more important what we say to ourselves than what other people say to us. And I think what you're telling us today is going to help us to antagonize and to interrogate ourselves so that we can start doing some things differently and seeing life differently. You know, there is so much more to who we are than who we are today. Like there's a better version. There's a better you just waiting, screaming, let me out, you know, on the other side. But we do have to work.
The work brings freedom.
Mm-hmm.
The work brings freedom. And our fears are what perceptions we have in here that are running through like a thought train in our head, and we either ride that train or watch it go by. My thoughts are not me. My feelings are not facts, and my thoughts are not facts.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they ran through there doesn't mean it's the whole truth.
That's right.
I don't attach to them, kind of like a bird's nest. I don't have to let those thoughts build a nest in my brain and let birds come in and lay eggs and everything else. I do not have to do that. They can just pass right on by, and I do not have to attach to them. Mm-hmm. And so learning what thoughts we attach to helps us learn how we do see, how we see ourselves, how we see other people. Because if I see myself as beneath everybody, I'm going to act that way. And I'm going to treat others in a certain way. If I see myself as better than, I'm going to treat people and perceive them already in a certain way. And so my communication goes directly along with that perception. Playing field.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Maggie, you have given us some keys today and some tools to help us to look at life a little differently. I think that what you've given us will cause each one of us, if we're willing, to begin to become who we were intended to be. Because I think one of the most freeing things is to know that you have the power. Nobody but you. Nobody can stop you. You alone, no matter what has happened to you, you have the power to become the best you could ever be. No one is stopping you but you and your thoughts. Maggie, we really appreciate what you have given us today. You have got us locked and loaded, you know, with some tools and a greater understanding about us as individuals. Is there anything else that you would like to leave with us on today?
I would say be encouraged. Be encouraged. Not everything about ourselves, and we can tend to take it this way, is bad and needs to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
sometimes what we need to do is unbecome so that we can become. We need to unbecome these learned behaviors. We need to unbecome these negative thought processes, these negative beliefs, so that we can become the most truest self that we can possibly be. And so that we can be a light that shines even more brightly in darkness. And so one of the mantras for the middle part of my life is belonging and becoming. Belonging and becoming. And I like to break that down also because the conjugation of the verb to be is I am. And so for me, of course, I am being the name of God. And I am longing. I am coming. And that means a lot to me. And so if I am practicing a longing for God, a longing for my truest self, they will be brought forth and I will become that.
Awesome. Thank you so much once again, Maggie, for joining us on the Josilyn Drake Show and sharing with us and helping us to be a better us and helping us to know that, we're not all bad. No, we're not. No, we're not. But there are some things that we can tweak, adjust, and change. And so once again, thank you, Maggie. We hope that you enjoyed the show, and we will see you next time on the Josilyn Drake Show. Have an awesome day. Bye, guys. Thanks for watching. The Josilyn Drake Show never stops. The conversation continues on Facebook and Instagram. Follow us, like us, and be a part of the conversation. Also, tune in on Thursdays at 5 p.m. to XL Radio and listen to the Josilyn Drake Radio Show. Until next time, enjoy life. See you next week on the Josilyn Drake Show. Get Jocelyn's new single from her upcoming sophomore album, In This Place, on iTunes and all digital outlets. Log on to jocelyndrake.com and get your Dear Younger Me apparel.